this is what I know. This is comfortable. It's safe. I can navigate the world of education and feel confident in it. The idea of switching to something completely different was a little terrifying.
You're listening to the Quit Your Job and Get Creative podcast, where we talk about quitting your unfulfilling job and pursuing your creative entrepreneurial dreams. My goal is to help you realize earning a living doing what you love is possible for you. You'll hear stories of women who have quit their 9-to-5 jobs and started their creative businesses. You'll learn how they did it, the ups and downs, and secrets to success. I believe that you are good enough and capable to live out your dreams. I'm your host, Jocelyn Clarkson. Now, let's get started. Welcome back to another episode. I am so excited for today's episode. I have Kendra Swalls. She is a former teacher with the gift for making complicated things seem simple. Kendra is a mom of 2, photographer, and educator. In 2012, she started her photography business, and what started as a hobby alongside her teaching career quickly turned into a successful business. And today she'll be talking about building a know, like, and trust factor to drive more sales in your business. Welcome, Kendra. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you tell people where you're actually dialing in from?
Yeah, so I'm in the Dallas, Texas area. I'm in a little small town outside of Dallas.
I love, being able to podcast, run this podcast and interview women like you, because it's always so interesting to realize how far, but how connected everyone is. And it's so cool to be able to talk to women like you that I would normally never run into on a day-to-day basis.
No,
so I think
it's
that's
so
super
cool.
Perfect.
I love it too.
Well, I love to start this podcast with this one simple question. What did you want to be when you were young?
I always wanted to be a teacher. I was the kid who, I would beg my mom as a treat to take me to what I called the teacher store in our town. And it was this little store that sold lesson planning books and sticker charts and posters the teachers would put on their walls. And it was my favorite thing to go and play school with my dolls and my stuffed animals at the end of the day. So that was always what I wanted to be when I was a little kid.
So, growing up, and then when it was time to study, did you end up studying education in college, or how did you really start to get into education?
Yeah, it was just kind of this path. I have a lot of my family members were in education. They were teachers, principals, coaches, things like that. So I was surrounded by teachers. And so that was just sort of my path. I mean, I honestly never really questioned it. I just was like, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to get a degree in education. I want to teach elementary school. And I did that. I went to a college. I got an undergrad in elementary education. I did take as an elective, I took a film photography class, again, just for fun, thinking it's a creative little outlet. It's kind of fun. I want to learn more about it. And I remember having one moment in college where I was like, is this really what I want to do? Maybe I want to do something in marketing. Marketing sounds exciting, advertising. But I was like, no, I'm going to be a teacher. I completely dismissed that idea within 2 seconds flat. But it was just kind of always what I thought I wanted to do. And I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit later on, but I actually went and got a master's degree in education as well after I started teaching, because I was looking for I was craving something beyond just being in the classroom. And so I was like, well, maybe if I go get my master's and I can do something else education related. And so I even have a master's degree in curriculum, thinking I wanted to go into curriculum design.
Yeah. I mean, so you went all the way. And when you mentioned that you had this thought that was saying, maybe this isn't it. Was that the first time you realized that you were having those thoughts, or had they been coming up for a while now?
No. And it's funny because I can remember the that thought. I can remember standing on campus. I was talking to somebody, I don't remember who, but they were talking about whatever degree they were majoring in. And I was like, oh, well, my cousin's doing this degree. That might be kind of fun. And it was an advertising marketing degree. And it was really I think the reason it stands out in my mind is because it was never anything that I ever really thought about it. And I don't know if it goes back to the fact that I was from a really small school. I mean, even my high school, it was a small private school. I graduated with 38 kids in my class, which is insane. So I don't know if it was like I lived in a bit of a bubble and I wasn't exposed to a lot of other things. The college I went to was kind of a smaller college also. It wasn't like a huge public university. And so I just wasn't always exposed to these other things. So yeah, when I got into college and I started seeing other people exploring other paths or other people who were like, I have no clue what I want to do. I was like, oh, well, okay, maybe I do. But then it just felt safe. And that was kind of like the motto of my life was like, let's just stay on the safe path. And the safe path was teaching.
Right. You know, it's crazy to think about when we're at a point at the end of high school when it's really time to select your major, as basically you're making a decision of what you're going to do for the rest of your life when you're 18. And it's right before, you know, you start college, you have to declare your major and start looking at the schools. And it's so crazy to think how little we know at that time, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I felt the same way when it came time to pick a career to major in. It was either business, law, or medical. And so I was like, well, it's going to be business for me. And, you know, for me, knowing that there are careers out there in like now podcasting, fashion design, things that I do now, like business coaching, those were never careers that I've ever heard of until after I graduated college. Like it's actually just so crazy to think about how little we know and how we're almost forced to make decisions at a point in our lives when we don't know, right? And when we're so young. So that's a pretty interesting, I think, thing that our society kind of pushes on us. But
well, and it's getting like even younger. Like I have a daughter who's fixing to go into middle school, and we have friends whose kids are like middle school, high school age. And it's almost like they want them to pick a path. It's like that you get to this point and like before you get into high school, they're like, okay, are you going to go like the arts path or like the science technology path or the math, you know? And I'm like, they're 12. Like what 12-year-old has any understanding of that? And again, the exposure piece, I think a lot of it comes down to like a lot of times they're just not exposed to what are your options? Like what career paths are there really out there? Unless it's someone you know in your family or a family friend that you have. That's the only exposure a lot of kids have to different careers anyway.
So you go to college, you study education. What was your first job, your professional job out of college?
So my first job was a second grade teacher at a little small school, like I said, kind of outside the Dallas area. And it was like the school district I really wanted. It was the school I was happy about. It was by all accounts, it was an incredible job, like a really good job. I mean, I loved the teachers I worked with. I loved the school I was at. It was really good. And I stayed at that school for 8-9 years, I think, before I actually moved to different school. So it was kind of my like jumping off point for the first almost decade of my career.
Yeah. And how long were you there for?
I think it was 8 years.
8 years. And as you're going through these 8 years, do you still hear that same voice saying, maybe this isn't it?
Yeah. So that was when I think it was around must have been year 5 that I was like, oh, I'm getting a little burned out of like the classroom. Like I started having this idea of like this, I don't know if this is really where I see myself like until I'm 65. Because I had a professor in college who she taught in the same classroom the entirety of her teaching career from the time she was like 22, 23 until she retired at like 65. And I was in like same classroom, everything. I was like, that's insane. And like, I started thinking more and more about her. And I was like, I can't, like, that's not what I'm meant to do. Like, I need something else. And so I didn't really know what that something else was. So I was like, well, maybe it's, you know, something else in education. So I'm going to go back and get my master's degree. That was when I started. I think I started my master's degree in 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. And I was like looking at, do I want to go into counseling? Do I want to go into administration? I really liked the idea of like teaching teachers. And so I was like, well, I'll go into curriculum and that'll kind of open some doors. So yeah, I had that sort of voice in my head and that feeling of like, there's something else. I just don't know what that something else is. So let me go figure out what else is out there.
Right. And so when you're trying to figure out what that something else is, you continue to go down the education path.
Yeah.
Why didn't you explore other areas at that point in time?
So I think it comes down to two things we've kind of already touched on, which is one is I just didn't know. Like it was either you're a teacher or you completely change career paths, which I was like, well, I don't have any certifications or degrees in that. I have no other like skill set that I'm aware of. And also like the other option was basically these teachers who would do like MLM programs. You know, they would sell Mary Kay or skincare products or, you know, whatever it might be. And I mean, I tried that and I was like, this is not for me. And so I felt a little limited. At the same time, too, I also was like, this is what I know. This is comfortable. It's safe. I can navigate the world of education and feel confident in it. The idea of switching to something completely different was a little terrifying.
Right. Yeah. No, when I was, in my finance career, I was unhappy in one company and I thought, okay, I'm not happy here. It's the company. It's my team. And so I would hop jobs to different companies and I'm like, all right, it's clearly not the company because I ended up working for one of the best companies I worked for my last job. And I was like, well, it's clearly not them. I think it's clearly me.
Yeah.
But no, it's easier to just stay within your comfort zone than it is to go out and seek something new, especially when you've already invested so much time in your education and it's hard to let go of those dreams because they stick with you, right? Like you have this idea, you've been dreaming about being a teacher for such a long time that it almost becomes part of your identity. And it's really hard to let go of that.
Well, it's funny it's funny you say that because when I eventually did get out of teaching, I had like an identity crisis. And it was a thing where like, I didn't realize I was doing it, but someone pointed out to me, they were like, how come every time you introduce yourself to someone, you always say, well, I used to be a teacher, but now I do this. And I was like, I was so tied to that identity that the idea of being a teacher, it felt so noble. And every time you said, oh, I'm a teacher, people were like, oh, bless you. Like I could never do that. And there is something a little bit validating about that feeling. And when you take that away, it's kind of like, oh, well, what am I now? So that was definitely a part of it. The identity part was a big part of it.
I 1000% agree. I put a lot of weight on my role, who I was working for and how much I was making. And so same thing, I used to say right when I quit my job, I was like, oh, well, I used to be a financial consultant too. Like I still kind of am, but not really, but it's like, all right, I'm an entrepreneur. But
yeah.
No, it's hard. It's definitely hard. So tell me how you started your photography business on the side. How did that come about? And how did you turn that into a business?
So at the time that this all happened, it was, you look for like the craziest time in your life and that's the best time to start something new. So I was going through my master's program, newly married, found out we were pregnant with our first daughter, trying to sell a house, like all the things were happening, still working full time. And I was like, I need something that feels like it's mine. And my husband had all these my fiance at the time, he had all these hobbies. He was an outdoorsman, he likes to fish and play basketball, play sport, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I need something to do. Like I need a hobby. And he was like, well, you're really good at taking pictures and you're always taking photos. Why don't you like do that? And so he bought me a digital camera. And at the time, my best friend had just had her first baby. And so we were like, yeah, we could do this. Like she was a teacher too, kind of looking for something at the same time I was. So we actually started the business together originally. And we were like, we can do this like on weekends and holidays and summer breaks and make a little extra money. And maybe like you could stay home with your kids one day. And because I didn't have my daughter yet. And so we did that and it was fun. And it was like, we would have like a session here for someone she knew and a session here for someone I knew. And it was for the first 6 months or so, like it was just kind of really sporadic. And then we started looking at, we were like, you know what? We both enjoy this, but we both enjoy different aspects of the business. So she was like, I'm going to go do this thing. But she loved working with like babies, where it was like, give me the adults that can follow directions. So we kind of branched off. And for the first 2 or 3 years, it was really honestly just a hobby. I mean, I would make money at it, but it was, I'd make money for 2 months out of the year and the rest of the year it was crickets because I wasn't really working my business. And then when we decided we were going to have our second daughter, and we were trying to get pregnant, we got pregnant, all these things. I was like, I need to get serious about this. So really, I kind of say the first 2 to 3 years of my business weren't really a business. And it was when I decided I really wanted to make this thing work. And I kind of like doubled down. I was like, I'm going to make sure that I know everything about the business part of the business because I've got the photography part down. That's why I spent the first 3 years learning, was like how to use my camera, how to manipulate lighting, how to do styling, how to like do all of these things. And I had the artistic part down. I didn't understand the business of how to run a business. And as soon as I started putting my time and energy into the business of it, that's when everything kind of took off from there.
I also think it's so important to realize that you don't need to have the experience to start. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people from starting their business is you could have easily been like, I really want to start this photography business, but I don't have any experience. I'm not a real, like, I didn't go to photography school. Like, I didn't major in this. I don't know how to go about this. And that could have been enough to stop you. But you were like, no, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make the best out of YouTube, the best out of Google, and I'm going to build that community that I want for myself. And you ended up learning the photography part, which I think, you know, I could be biased because I have a business background. I feel like the business side of things, that's the easy part. The creative side, that's the hard part. So tell me about the point. So you mentioned that the first 3 years were almost like your experimental phase, your hobby phase. The point where you decided this is going to be a real thing, this is going to be a real business. What was your first step to turning that into a hobby, turning that from a hobby into a business?
So I started kind of shifting my mindset from, okay, how can I create just really pretty photos to how can I provide people with something that is going to help fill a need that they have. And at the time, I'm trying to think exactly what this is. I was kind of also honing in on like what type of photography I wanted to do, and which has evolved tremendously over the years. But at that time I was like, I think I want to do weddings, which I never said. I was like, I'm never shooting weddings. That sounds like miserable. But I did one kind of by accident for a friend of a friend. And I was like, oh, that's really fun. And so I started learning more about the wedding industry. And through that, I was like, okay, it's not necessarily about how good your work is. It's about how can you speak to these brides in a way that taps into like their emotional side, because it's very much an emotional purchase at that point. And I learned, I just kind of was consuming as much as I could. I was following a lot of these other like bigger name wedding photographers, and they were all talking business talk and less creative. It wasn't like, here's how I took this photo. It was here's how I used this photo to market to this bride, this particular type of bride. And the real moment that it kind of was like, oh, that's how it all makes sense, was when I figured out like, who is your ideal client? Because up until that point, I was like, no, my business is for everybody. It's anybody that will pay me money. I will work with you if you will pay me money. I will photograph your hamster if you want me to. I don't care. Like I did not have any clue what it meant to know who your ideal client was. And I had bought into kind of this group coaching program. And one of the first things she had us do was create an ideal client profile. And I was like, oh, this is ridiculous. Why do I need to know like what kind of coffee my ideal client drinks? Like, this seems dumb. And I sort of put it off. And she reached out to me and she was like, Kendra, you haven't submitted your ideal client profile. Like, do you need help with this? And I was like, yeah, I just don't understand it. And once she explained to me how knowing who you're talking to affects everything else in your business, it was like I almost could like visually see myself in my business turning a corner. And it was like, oh, this is how it all makes sense. This is how it all works. And then from there, it was just kind of this snowball effect of like, how much more can I take in? How much more can I consume? And what else can I experiment with? And the benefit of working full time and doing this was that I had the ability to kind of experiment within my business and be like, okay, if I try doing this, if I do bridal shows, how does that work for my business? Because I can afford to invest some of my money in bridal shows because I have this other money coming in. Or if I invest in this type of marketing, or if I try out this type of thing, I had that sort of that safety net at the time of like, it's okay if it doesn't work. because I still have my full-time job for income. And so I think that couple of years gave me the space I needed to really like learn how my business worked and the different ways that it worked.
I love, love, love that you mentioned that you tapped into what really your mission is and what you're actually selling, because you're selling more than just photography at this point. And that's one of the things that I like to tell my coaching students. It's like, you're not just selling clothes, because anyone can sell clothes. And if you're talking about what differentiates yourself from your competitors, it's like, you're not selling clothes. You're selling women feeling comfortable in their skin. You're not selling financial services. You're selling financial freedom so that families can spend time with their loved ones and travel and make new memories. Like, it's so much more than the product and the service. And I feel like that's so key into actually developing a brand. So I love, love, love that that's what you had to change really to make that from hobby, shooting hamsters, delivering beautiful moments that, brides will forever remember. I love that hamster joke.
I mean, hey, there was a point in time if somebody had come to me and said, look, our family hamster, I'd been like, sure, just tell me when and where.
Oh my gosh, I love this. All right, so let's dive into the topic here. I know today you're going to give us some tips on how to build the know, like, and trust factor to drive more sales. So how about you first start off with telling us, what is the know, like, and trust factor, and how does it help businesses?
So the know, like, and trust factor, I call it like the 3 pillars of like the foundation of your business. And so know, obviously, as it sounds like, how do people know that your business exists? Do they like you and the mission you stand for? And then do they trust you? And all 3 of those things have to work together, because if you're missing one of those, then your foundation kind of crumbles. So it ties all of the pieces of your business together into sort of these 3 pillars so that everything else rests on that.
Okay. So I love how you really took that, each component, know, like, and trust, and build it into 3 different pillars, because, I think that a lot of people and a lot of business owners might just focus on one pillar and not really realizing that they're doing it. So let's break it down. The know, right? For small businesses who are just starting out, a lot of the questions I hear is, how do I get myself out there, right? So what are some of the ways that small business owners can build that know?
So I think the first thing, and this was a lesson I learned through my photography business, is that as a business owner, we all assume that people know what we do. And because we are in the business and we're in like our marketing, we feel like we're just constantly talking about our business. The reality is there's a lot of people who have no clue what you do. So here's the example I always tell. Little quick stories. When I was teaching, I was, at the time, I was also photographing high school seniors. And I worked with a school full of teachers that were women who all had kids. And there was a teacher who worked about 5 doors down from my classroom. We saw each other every single day. And she had a daughter that was a senior that year. And I was in the teacher's lounge after school one day, and I overheard her talking about how she had hired this guy to do her daughter's senior photos, and they didn't turn out the way they wanted to. They were too like posed and like very, traditional and not like creative and fun and like her personality. And I said to them, I was like, oh, well, I wish, I had known I do senior photography. She's like, wait a minute, what? I didn't know you did photography. And I had this moment of like, oh my gosh, I literally work like steps from your classroom. We see each other every single day. We have conversations every single day for years. And you don't know that this is what I do. Like, clearly I'm not telling people enough.
Hi, Boss Babe. I want to take a quick second to tell you about how you can get free business advice, coaching, and trainings from me for free. Yes, I said that right. Absolutely free. If you are thinking of starting a business or have already started a business, but you're not getting the sales that you want or are struggling in general, then you need to attend my free weekly live trainings. I cover topics like how to prepare to quit your job, or how to get over your fear of showing your face online, and so much more. You can register using the link in my show notes, or simply go to my Instagram at Quit Your Job and Get Creative and click on the link in bio where it says free training and make sure to register. Can't wait to see you there and help you grow your business. Now, let's get back to the show.
And so the first thing I always say is like, how often are you talking about your business? Where are you sharing about it? Like, is it clear on your social media accounts that this is what you do? And I know that if you are working a full-time job and you're like, well, I don't want people to like think that I'm not committed to my job because I have this other business. Like, you have to just remove that idea of like, what are other people going to think? Because they're not going to think anything if they don't even know that you do this. Like, you need to put yourself out there. So I always say, like, in the very beginning, and give yourself like a rule, like 3 times a week, you have to post something on social media, letting people know what you do. Whether it is, hey, did you know that I also happen to do senior photography? If you're looking for a photographer for your high school senior, blah, blah, blah. Or like, hey, did you know that I make custom signs for your next event or party or whatever? Like, there's so many, like, everybody has a side business these days. And so it's not going to be odd or weird. You're not spamming people. You're not annoying people. And honestly, if you're annoying them, then they're not your client anyway. And it's fine. Like, your Aunt Susie is probably not your client. So if she gets annoyed with you sharing your stuff, like, sorry, Aunt Susie, but it's not for you anyway. So just ignore it. But if you're not, if I always say like the 3 pillars, if you take the no pillar away, none of the other pillars matter, because if they don't know that you exist, then they can't get to know you and they can't like you. I mean, they can't like you and they can't trust you. So the more you can share your business, the better off you're going to be.
I 1000% agree. And definitely as small business owners, you know, one thing I've realized is that we think people care more than they actually do. And when I say people, I don't mean your immediate friends and family, but I mean everyone else, like the random people who follow you, the public, right? And so there is this, that's a misconception that we think, we're being annoying. We're putting too much out there. We're annoying all our followers. And, you know, I like to think that, you know, if that's the case, people can just unfollow. And when they unfollow, they're actually doing you a favor because you're narrowing down what your audience actually is. It's almost like when you build an email list and they unsubscribe, it's like, good, I'm glad you unsubscribed because you're clearly not my customer and you don't find this valuable. And by you being on my email list, you're messing up my stats.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's like a clean house.
And I want you to think too, like, I mean, think about how many times do you go on Facebook or Instagram or whatever platform you spend time on, and do you ever feel like you're annoyed by somebody that you care about, you know, like a friend or a family member? I don't think I've ever once been annoyed by somebody sharing about their business. And I don't know if that's because I have a business too and I work with business owners, but I'm like, yeah, go for it. Girl, share that stuff. And then on the flip side, there's been so many times where like out of the blue, someone will be like, oh, I'm looking for someone. This happened recently. They were like, I'm looking for someone that does like charcuterie boards. And they were like, oh, the teacher at the school that my kids go to, she does them. And I'm like, wait a minute. My kids had her as a teacher and I had no clue that that's what she did. Like, they're not, you know, we think that everybody is paying attention to us 24/7 and they're just not. So overshare so that you can actually be sharing a normal amount, if that makes sense.
That is such a good reminder. It seems like so simple, but you're right. If you don't have the know, you don't have the like and the trust. So moving on to the like, what are some ways that business owners can be liked?
So this is one that's, I think it's a little bit like, I don't say controversial, but it's one people push back on a little bit more than the others. And that is that I really honestly believe that if you are a business owner, then you are a personal brand, and people connect with people and people connect with the mission behind your brand. And even if you have a team of people, like, you need to almost have a face. Like, think about like Progressive and Geico and these insurance companies. It's insurance, guys. Nobody cares about a insurance company, but they've made it personal by adding a face to the brand. You have the Gecko, or you have Flo, or, you know, you have the Mayhem guy from State Farm or whatever it is. But like, they have put a face to a business that is normally very boring. And so if you, as a personal business owner, are the face of your brand, what that usually means is, I'm not saying you need to share every aspect of your business or personal life, but people need to feel like that they have a reason to want to like purchase from you. Your product may be the most incredible product on the market, but if they don't feel personally connected to it, they're not going to buy it. So I always say, like, for me I'll just say, like, Instagram is my main platform I use. The stories part of Instagram is one of my like most valuable resources, because that is where I can talk about, like, I posted the other day about, like, how soon do you decorate for Christmas? Do you wait until December or after Thanksgiving, or do you do it November 1st? And I'm like, these are things that I really like want to have a conversation with my audience about. It doesn't necessarily relate to my business, but it's about me. And it's about, like, I talk about the fact that my kids both play sports. And so we're constantly go, go, go. And I'll do things like, hey, we're out of the house 3 nights a week for practices and games. I need some really easy, quick family recipes that the kids are going to, enjoy. Send me your best recipes. And because my audience is primarily moms, they're like, oh, I totally understand. Like, they connect with me on that level. And again, it goes back to, who is your audience? Like, who are you really trying to speak to? Because if you're trying to talk to everybody, you're not going to connect with anybody. So you really need to understand, like, I know my audience are moms with school age, like elementary age children who are building a business, trying to be mom, trying to be wife, trying to be all the things. And so I can talk about those things in my stories or on my feed or in my post or wherever. And they're going to be like, yeah, like, she gets me. And like, we have this connection now. So when I do go and post about a new service or product that I offer, they're more likely to purchase that from me because they like who I am as a person and they like what my business stands for.
I love that you are talking about this personal touch to your business, because yeah, you are your brand. And, as a coach, I hear so many of my students that don't, like, I'll do audits of their social media and their website, and nowhere on the website, nowhere do I see a picture of them or their bio. And oftentimes they don't put themselves out there because they're scared of the rejection. They're scared of what people are going to think and say. And so, they don't find success in their business. And I'm like, you have to put yourself out there. People buy with, their emotions. Like, who are they going to know who you are? Like, who am I buying from? Am I going to get scammed? Like, if I buy this, is it going to be sent to my house? Like, I don't even know who you are. And I think it's so important to talk about, that's this like factor, because it's not just all business. There is people buy from people. And I love that you're bringing this up. And so what would you say to business entrepreneurs who are shy of putting themselves out there and are really having a hard time building that like factor?
Yeah. And it's very common. I mean, like you were saying, like, I see this a lot too. And it's one of the things that I get a lot of pushback on is they don't want to put myself out there for a multiple of reasons. I mean, I have a lot of women who are like, I don't feel comfortable sharing the behind the scenes of my life. And that's totally fine. I've got a whole, like, one of my top performing posts on Instagram is how to share mom life without showing your kids online. And it's still to this day, I get people commenting and sharing and liking it. And I put it out like 6 months ago because it's a real thing. People are hesitant to put themselves online. So my suggestion is, one is start baby steps. So like you said, putting a photo on your website and having your photo be like the profile image on your social media page. It can be, if you're self-conscious, hire a photographer to do it and to explain to them, like, I'm very self-conscious. These are the things I'm self-conscious about. And they will help you get a photo that you feel really confident in. And even if that is the only photo you put up for a little while, like, have it be on your website, have it be on your social media profile photo. And then the about me section, like, share in writing, talk about, who you are. Why did you start this business? What are the things that you really enjoy? And then slowly start incorporating, like I said, it's baby steps. I'm not expecting you to like jump right into being this like, influencer creator type where you're on there all the time, but start small. And like one lady, I told her, she was one of my coaching clients, and she was like, I'm just not comfortable like putting myself on camera for stories. And I was like, okay, well, maybe like every day around her neighborhood, she would go for a walk. And I was like, while you're on your walk each day, take out your phone and take a picture of like, or a quick little video of your feet on the pavement or the flowers you see blooming in your neighbor's yard. And it can be a whole thing where it's like what I saw on my walk today, or maybe you take your dog with you and you take pictures of your dog. It's little things like that. It doesn't have to be your face all the time, but it's just little glimpses into who you are and what it is that your life is like, because we all think our life is boring and we all think we're boring, and we're all, just like you said earlier, we all think everybody's looking at us and judging us, but they're so focused on their own lives. They're not worried about yours. And so it just start with little things, just little small windows into who you are and what your life or your day is like. And that can lead into you being like, okay, I feel confident in this. Now I'm going to do one where like, there's a day I have my hair and makeup done. So I'm going to take a little selfie and I'm going to put that on my stories or something, it'll eventually get there. And a year from now, you'll look back and you'll be like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Yeah, it's certainly a muscle. It's like you have to, the more practice that the more times that you do it, the better. I used to be so shy to put myself on my website, and now here I am doing video podcasts. And doing lives. And it's actually kind of funny to think like the first few months of my business, I didn't gain any followers. And I was like, well, duh, because people didn't know who I was.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like if you're feeling like you have to present yourself in a certain way, I want you to intentionally follow people on social media who are doing it in a way that you feel like you could potentially do it yourself. Like if you're the type that, like I use Elise Myers for an example. I love how she will show up on social media with her hair a mess because she's got like that wavy curly hair and she'll have like little pieces sticking out and she's in like a hoodie and no makeup. And I'm like, okay, that it reminds me that it's okay if I show up on my stories today without having my hair. Like the other day, I woke up, my eye was swollen and I still got on my stories. I was like, sorry for the swollen eye, guys. Just pretend like it's not there. And like, but again, it is like you said, it's a muscle and you have to practice that to get more comfortable with it. But if you are also seeing examples of other people in your social feed each day, doing it in a way that you're like, okay, she did it, so I can do it too. That's going to help you build that confidence.
Right. And it's little things like that that really bring out your personality. Like going on with the swollen eye, like, and you make a funny joke about it. You make people laugh, it allows your personality to really come out in very like small, but really beautiful ways. So I love that tip. And so now moving on to trust, right? And I think this one, even I have struggled with this one, especially if you are just starting out, right? How do you get people to trust you? And I think, people, or at least I do, I think testimonials and reviews, and it's like, well, how do I get clients if I don't have testimonial reviews? What comes first, the clients or the reviews, So if you could talk more about trust and how people can build that, especially when they don't have, experience or a portfolio to really showcase.
So I think if you don't have the experience or like the clients, the next best thing you can do is pull the curtain back a little bit on your business, have transparency in your business. Because if you are kind of hiding behind this like cloak, like you said, you're not putting yourself out there. This is, again, it's where the know and the like piece come in. If they already know about you and they already like you as a person because you're sharing these little behind the scenes kind of moments, it's hard to fake that for very long. I mean, people do fake it, but I'm just saying, like, if you're a business owner and you are constantly showing up online and going, okay, guys, well, this happened today, or like you're being transparent, you're being authentic, that builds trust as well, because they're like, oh, she like really is like the real deal. And then sharing like the transparency within your business, like giving free kind of samples. So I have a program that's called the Inbox Insider, and it's a top to bottom email marketing program, how to start, launch, and grow an email program. And in that, I have these email templates. So you have like templates you can send out to your email list that are kind of done for you. And before I had even sold a single course, I was sharing some of those templates. I was like, hey, this is what this template, like this email you're reading right now, it's actually from one of my templates. Like I was sending that out to my email list, and I was letting them know, like, kind of pulling the curtain back and going, take a peek inside, because until I have clients that can tell you about what's going on inside my business or inside this program or inside this service, I'm going to have to be the one to tell you. But the only way you're going to believe me is if you actually see it in action. So having like little video tours of the program, or, recording, like a screen recording of me, like working on something. Those are all things that can help build trust. And then the last thing is just if you under promise, over deliver. So again, this comes with the easiest ways with social media. If you say that, you are going to, or podcasting, if you say, I'm going to put out a podcast episode once a week, or I'm going to do a blog post once a week, or I'm going to post to social media 3 times a week, you need to do that, because then your audience starts to trust that what you say is what you're going to actually deliver on. But if you are like, okay, I'm going to start a blog or a podcast, I'm going to put out an episode or a post a week, and then you do that, and then for 3 or 4 weeks you disappear, and then you pop back in, you're like, okay, sorry guys, I got busy and forgot. And then you start up again, and then again you disappear for a couple of weeks. They start to go, well, if she can't even keep up a blog or a podcast, like how am I supposed to know that she's going to like stick with what she says she's going to do in the product or service she's selling to me? So actions speak louder than your words, because you can put stuff on a landing page, but if you are actually showing it by how you're showing up, then it's going to have a lot more weight than any words you're going to put on a page.
I love that idea, Kendra, that you're like, you know what? If you don't have those reviews, those clients, you have to show them. And there's so many ways that you can do that, especially through, TikTok reels, where you don't even have to sit down and talk. You can just show, right?
Yeah.
What you're doing, which I think is great. One other thing that I've found very helpful is providing service, maybe at a discounted price, in exchange for a review. So for example, how you started your photography business, and, you mentioned that you took pictures of your friend who just had a baby, right?
Yep.
So it's like taking those opportunities to start building that portfolio, and then, asking for your friends who you are doing, things for free or at a discounted price or in exchange for service, to be like, okay, I will do this in exchange for a review, maybe a video testimonial or a shout out on Instagram. So there's so many other ways that you can leverage that, but I love the tips that you provided. So I'm curious, Kendra, how do you manage your social media? Because you have your photography business, you have the podcast. How do you manage it? Do you batch work? Do you outsource it? How do you keep up with it all?
So I've tried a lot of different things. I've tried schedulers. I've tried all the things. What works for me is it's kind of a combination of batch creating and then just sort of posting on the fly, which is not really a strategy that I suggest. But the batch creating, I do a lot, like in my photography, especially because, again, it's become more of like my side business. And then the podcast and my coaching business has become kind of the primary thing. So with my photography is I will go, okay, I have all of these sessions that I've done, or I'm going to pull these, like repost these old things that I've done in the past. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of like schedule things out a little bit. And so it sort of automates and runs itself. And then on my like podcast and coaching page, it's a lot more of me being like, okay, let me look at the next 2 weeks, because my brain won't let me go beyond that a lot of times. And I'm going to say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, these are the things I really want to focus on. A lot of times it revolves around my podcast episodes, which come out on Wednesdays. And so I'm like either talking about the topic ahead of time, or I'm talking about it up until the next episode comes out. So that helps me kind of like plan my content. And then I think also, again, like I said, with the photography, I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I feel like that I find myself repeating the same things over and over and over again. And I was like, why am I burning myself out creating content every single week when I'm just repurposing what I already have? Why not take a post that I've already done that did really well 6 months ago, reshare it? I mean, you can download the original content. There's websites that let you do that. Take the actual caption I posted the first time, reshare it as a brand new post. And this is the thing. It kind of goes back to that like no factor. People are like, well, if you're resharing it, then your audience is going to know it's reshared because you posted it 6 months ago. And my response is like, I'm sorry, do you remember anybody's content from 6 months ago that you follow on social media? Like, I don't know, from 6 hours ago. Like right. They could repost something from yesterday and I probably wouldn't notice it. And so you also like, you'll have new followers. You'll have like people who've never seen it before. They didn't see it the first time. So a lot of what I do is sort of recycling old content and making it new again so that I'm not burning myself out trying to constantly kind of stay on this hamster wheel of content creation. It all comes back to hamsters. There you go.
I love to think of this idea as, rewearing your clothes in your closet. Mm-hmm. Like, just because you wore that top once doesn't mean you can't rewear it again. And not everyone saw you in that top, right? Like, yeah. And you can style it different ways, throw a blazer on, throw a belt on. And again, at the end of the day, if people notice, oh my God, you're wearing the same shirt that you wore 6 months ago. Like, yeah, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not like, we're not all out here being Kim Kardashian. Like, if she wears something twice, then people are probably going to notice. But as much as we would like to think that people pay that much attention to us, they just don't. And when it comes to social media, like, I don't know about you, but the way I consume social media is I get onto like Instagram and I go through whatever is currently right there in front of me. I'm not clicking on like Jocelyn's page and going to her feed and scrolling back for the last 3 months worth of content. I'm just not. Unless it's the first time I've ever seen your profile. And so this idea that it has to be like a super aesthetically pleasing feed and that everything has to be brand new and you can't, like, that's just, in my opinion, you're wasting time and energy that could be better spent on other things. And so simplify it. My last little tip when it comes to social media is you don't have to do all the things because there is so many ways that you can spread yourself then. Platforms alone, you've got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter. There's new ones all the time that come out, and if you're trying to be on all the platforms, you're going to burn out. And then also each platform within itself has like 30 different features you can be using. Instagram has the feed, the reels, the lives, the stories, all these things. Focus on like one or two things and let everything else go. Because one, if your audience is not on that platform, it's not benefiting you anyway. And two, how is your audience using that platform? Again, I said, I use stories a lot. That's how I connect to my audience. And that is the piece of Instagram I have chosen to put a lot of my time and energy to. I do reels, I do feed posts. I don't really do lives, but I do those other things sparingly because I know my audience connects with me the most in stories. So don't feel like you have to do all the things. Just choose a couple of them and focus on those.
I love that. I love, Kendra, that you're giving us, concrete tips. I think there's so much information out there and everything is so vague and it's refreshing to hear actual concrete steps of things that people can do to build those, know, like, and trust factors.
Well,
so thank you for that, Kendra. What are some actionable steps or tips that you would tell to our listeners who are listening right now, who find themselves miserable at a job, they want to start a business, but they don't know how or where to start?
So I would say step one is kind of do a self-evaluation of like, what is it that you are good at and what is it that you enjoy? Because I think a lot of people discount a business idea or a potential business idea because they're like, well, but that's not really something that you could do a business. You could do a business around anything, guys. Let's be real. You could be a professional hamster photographer if you wanted to be.
I was hoping for another hamster pun.
Let's just put that. If somebody wants to be a professional hamster photographer, I will fully back you on doing that. But I think like one of the things that I always tell people to do is like ask your coworkers, ask your friends, ask your family, like, what do you think I'm good at? Because like an example of a client of mine, she did this activity with her coworkers. She asked them, she's like, what is it that like, when you think of me, what is it that you think of like you would come to me for advice on? And almost unanimously, they were like organizations, spreadsheets, systems. And she was like, oh. And I was like, that is something not everybody is good at. I am not good at organization and spreadsheets, like in systems. Don't ask me to teach you that. And she was like, well, I didn't realize other people weren't good at that or that they didn't know how to do that. So kind of like doing a self-inventory or asking people and coming up with a list of things that you're good at, that you are, kind of excel in, but then also you enjoy. And then kind of go, okay, how can I turn these things into a business? So I'll use the example of someone who's really good. Like if you're the person who's known for always being super organized, everything's color coded, all that kind of stuff, then maybe you create some kind of little digital product that people can, like little templates they can buy and they can use it to organize things. Or maybe you create, labels that people can print off and organize their home pantry or little things like that, and start offering those to your family and friends and say, hey, can you share this out? Putting it out on Facebook. Like, it doesn't have to be this big, I'm going to start an LLC and I'm going to set up all these things. Like, start really small. I'm good at organizing. I'm going to create a little mini guide on how to organize your home pantry. Or there's a lady I follow who her whole thing is how to declutter your home. And she every January has a 5-day declutter challenge. And then she sells a little program at the end of it where it helps you declutter your whole home and life. And she does amazing at that. And that's something that she just realized through life, that she was like, oh, this is something I'm really good at and other people need. So that's step one. And then step two is just putting yourself out there. And again, not feeling like you have to go off the deep end. You're just doing little things at a time to kind of build up and see, are people interested in this? Do they want to actually pay me for this? And then it can grow from there. And you never know where it's going to take you. The business you have day one is not the business you're going to have day 365. So don't get too caught up in the long-term vision. Just focus on what can I do today to get me to the next step tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kendra, for all that. It's so funny. I had a long list of questions that I wanted to ask you, but you know what? I could talk to you all day.
This is so fun. I could do this all day too.
I want to respect your time, but no, thank you so much, Kendra. And where can people find you if people want to learn more about your business, marketing strategies, or just follow your journey? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Girl Means Business. And then you can go to my website, girlmeansbusiness.com. And that's where I have links to the podcast, and I've got some free resources and all kinds of stuff on there. So that's kind of my home base right there.
Awesome. All right, guys, go follow Kendra. Go take a look at her Instagram stories and see what she's up to. All right, guys, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. I truly hope you learned something new or became inspired to start your business. Make sure you're following me on Instagram so you can stay updated on new episodes. That's Quit Your Job and Get Creative. And if you ever have any questions around business or quitting your job, please don't hesitate to reach out to me via Instagram message. I'm here for you. See you in the next episode.